the more people watch this review, the more diluted it becomes. Let's talk about Incantation. So this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. Normally we talk about classic movies that some of us have seen over and over, but this time we're talking about something that's very recent, which is Incantation, which is a 2022 Taiwanese religious folk horror movie. So the story is essentially that this Taiwanese woman has this YouTube channel with her friends where they go to haunted places and investigate them essentially. For a video, they go to visit their extended relatives who live in this small mountain village, who every 10 years have this weird ceremony, and they basically want to witness it and participate. The purpose of the ritual is to contain a malevolent deity. And because they participate in the ritual, they become cursed. And then the movie jumps forward about 6 years, where only one of them has survived and has realized that the curse has spread to her daughter. And she then goes on a mission to understand the curse and to find a cure for it. So I've seen this movie a few times because it's one of those movies that I think a general audience will not have heard of, but among horror fans, it tends to get recommended quite a bit. So I first saw it about a year ago and have seen it a few times since then. Every time I watch it, I just enjoy it more and more. So you just saw it for the first time and knew nothing about it going in, right? I didn't tell you anything about it. What was your experience and your takeaway?
I think in the first half it was pretty slow, but then at the end of but then I took into consideration what you were saying before in terms of like it's not like any other, like it's unique. At first I was seeing pretty generic. At first I was thinking, okay, a slow possession that's gonna end up progressing and getting aggressive soon, and it was pretty much following that structure. But then it got interesting when the girl jumped off the roof. When she jumped off the roof, I was thinking, damn, I was expecting that she's dead, it is what it is, but then she came back up from the roof. I said, oh, okay. That's when my engagement level was pretty much caught. I was like, okay, now it's getting a bit, interesting. It was a good film. I think it made me a bit uncomfortable at times, especially when they were, I don't know what you would refer it to, but when they said please say, when she was saying please say these numbers, what is it, like not a ritual, but like
The invocation, or the incantation, rather. Yeah. So there's this
yeah,
incantation that is meant to invoke the goddess, right?
yeah. So when that came, like parts like that, it felt like I was like literally watching it, as in like it was like a footage that I found. And sometimes it felt like she was talking to me, so it felt like a personal feel. When there's times like that, a bit kind of like made me feel not a bit uncomfortable, but unsettling, because obviously I'm Christian in it. So when it comes to just like the paranormal and stuff like that, I'm a heavy believer, and of course because I'm Christian. So watching those scenes there, it was like I felt a bit unsettled because I was like, damn, like I've never seen, like usually I watch movies where, yeah, usually I watch movies like this. However, I don't think it was done in such a way where it was directly speaking at you. So it kind of felt like an engaging
Mm.
experience. And I didn't really want to be engaged in that way. So I think and me being unsettled in horror movies is good news. So I think I was definitely impressed at the way that they made me feel unsettled at times. It's not really a critique, but I don't know if I missed anything or
I
or
guarantee you missed about 70% of it
okay,
because
because
just because of just how the movie is made. But
people say like it's when reading reviews, people say like it's so unique, blah blah blah. But there must have been something I missed, because it doesn't seem like there was anything else that was done where I'm like, oh, this is like, I don't know, this was like different from the rest. So I don't know. So that's
how,
why
how many Buddhist horror movies have you seen?
not much.
Well, for me, the number is zero. I've not seen like every other movie about possession and demons. Not It's not 100% Christian, but like there's the occasional Japanese one. We talked about Primbon. That was one of the first movies we talked about, which is an Indonesian folk horror movie. So it's not like the European tradition is the only thing we know, right? But like this is very deeply rooted in Buddhism, right? So everything about it, from the incantation to Mother Buddha to all the symbolism, and we can get into that a little bit later on. All of that is very deeply rooted in Buddhism and like just the local religions. So like the thing that's portrayed in the early scenes when they go to the relatives to the little mountain village and they have their own little religion that they've been practicing for hundreds of years, That's how it is in Taiwan. Like according to I've never been, but according to every report I've seen, if you go like into a village, they probably have their own folk religion there, and it's like some version of Buddhism with various influences. And so this idea that they're worshipping like this variant of a Hindu goddess, that sort of thing happens. And that means that if you are Taiwanese, apparently, like I've read some accounts by people who are Chinese, Taiwanese, or just generally from East Asia, they are freaked out by this. Like if you were raised in a Buddhist tradition, this creeps you out because basically this is like just blasphemy. The movie, like these characters essentially do everything your grandparents said not to do. Right, and these characters do all of them, and in the first like 20 minutes, and then the rest of the movie is the punishment for that, basically. So that is basically what's interesting about this movie, but obviously for us that's not accessible, right? Because like there's a whole bunch of different hurdles here, like just a few different barriers to getting into this movie. Like I watched it with subtitles. Did you watch it dubbed or with subtitles?
So
That already is like one layer of distance, right? And then there's the culture, and there's the various traditions, there's the religion and the symbolism that comes with that. And then on top of it, it's found footage with a non-linear storytelling style, right? So there's all these different obstacles to getting into this movie, and yet it really works. Like at least for me, like this is not simply found like some random found footage movie that happens to have Buddhist imagery instead of Christian imagery. Like this is actually one of those movies that treats spirituality and these kinds of traditions really seriously in the sense of what if all of this was real, 100%. That's really what caught my attention, because especially like low budget horror movies, like the found footage type, the possession and exorcism type movies, tend to be really samey and rote, right? So almost every exorcism movie I've seen is some variant of the last 15 minutes of The Exorcist, right? Like somebody's tied to a bed, they have a demonic face, they are cursing at the priest, there's holy water, like there's pea soup vomit. Like it's all very formulaic. And then this comes along and it tells a completely different kind of story. And then that's before you get into the plot. So for me at least, that's really what makes me excited about this movie. And I was wondering, as somebody who just goes into it completely cold, does not like, I know maybe 10% of the symbolism that's in this movie, and I can give some examples. But as somebody like from your point of view, just with no prior knowledge, the reason I recommended this movie is to see like just what impact and what effect it has.
yeah, I hear what you're saying. I just think so. In terms of the impact, I think this one had, I want to say the most, but I'll say it's definitely up there when it comes to just the unsettlement that I felt. Like it was very. There were times where she was telling us to repeat what they were saying. Like whenever they would do the whole
The Incantation.
yeah, when they would do the incantation, even the scenes in the village, it was like I said, those it was definitely like, I felt like if I was to listen to it or repeat it, then I'd get possessed. That felt a bit like you said, it felt like I said, it felt more personal than anything. So that in that sense, yeah. And I think it might be to do because obviously I'm not familiar with Buddhism and obviously the imagery and obviously pretty much like the culture's views, not even the culture, but the people's views on what was going on. So of course, if I was like from there, then stuff like that would have been more impactful to me. Like it's like African stuff, right? If there was like a movie, like I know Urban Legends in Congo and stuff. If there was a movie that was kind of like executed in a similar manner, where my parents were telling me things that you should, because my parents do tell me certain things like when you go to Congo, they'll go to here, they'll do that, they'll go to the seed village, etc., etc. So I'm sure it would have had more of an impact, but because obviously I didn't know, that's why I'm gonna ask you like, what exactly do you think that I missed? Because like I said, I thought it was pretty straightforward, but clearly it isn't. So that was kind of like when I was watching it, I went in with like a pre-notion that this was gonna be something different from all the other found footage that I found. That's why I'm gonna ask you like, what is the difference that you saw in this movie in comparison to other found footage movies that you saw without knowing the history when it comes to, you said this was in Vietnam? Not Vietnam, you say
Taiwan.
Taiwan, yeah. So if you didn't know history of Taiwan, what would you say the difference was from this in comparison to any other movie? And what do you think I missed?
So what you probably missed was a whole lot of little details. So first of all, it's not because it's non-linear and there's a lot of moving pieces to the plot. On my first viewing, I did not pick up on very many of those, and with each additional viewing, like more pieces slot into place. So one example of something you might have missed is that, remember when Ronan gets custody back of Dodo and she teaches her how to write her name, right? So up until this point, Dodo is going by her nickname, right? Everybody calls her that. And then when Ronan first has custody of her again, she, like, as a game, she teaches Dodo how to write her full name, right? And that is when the haunting starts. And that is where, up until this point, Ronan could not be sure that Dodo is infected by the curse. Giving up your name is kind of how you complete the ritual, right? Like when they were in the village, they were asked to write their names on a piece of paper and offer it up to Mother Buddha. And that is how they created this connection. And Ronan was pregnant at the time, and the old woman in the village says, when the child has a name, you have to come back and offer up your child to the goddess as well. And that is basically what Ronan did 6 years later when she taught her daughter to write her name. That's not something I picked up on the first viewing, for example. And that is when the hauntings really start. And that is when Ronan has confirmation that she has not been able to outrun the curse. In the very end of the movie, it is revealed that she sought out the priest in China that explains to her how the curse works. So the entire, like when you first watch the movie, you first are under the impression that Ronan is just an average character in a haunted house movie where creepy things are happening to her, but she has no idea what's going on, and she's kind of afraid and looking around, and there was a startling noise, and she like looks down the dark corridor and stuff like that, right? For a while, like that sequence when Dodo first comes home and the hauntings start at night, that feels like a very standard ghost movie, right? But then there's a revelation later on that shows that she knew how the curse worked the entire time. And so she was not this kind of passive victim the entire time. She's a victim, but she's not. She knows how the curse works. And she's been working to spreading this curse the entire time, for example.
Oh, I see. Because I
Right.
knew, okay, so at the end when she said, obviously when she kind of like tricked us, she said, I'm hoping I'll save my door as much people, when people say that, when she pretty much tricked people to say the incantation. And then I was like, okay, so, but I thought that was at that point. I didn't know that was something she was doing throughout the recording.
That also means that she's been making this recording the entire time on purpose. Right? The entire thing is a trick to get us to care enough to watch the video. And so by the time she tells us what she's doing, it's too late. We've already seen it, and we're already cursed. Right? So she's already invited us to say the incantation, and even if you just think the incantation, that's enough. It's like a mind virus, right? And also, we've seen the video of that crypt where the Buddha statue exists. And so, within the logic of the movie, everybody who's seen it, who's watched this far, has already been cursed. And then Ronan tells us what she's been doing and apologizes to us for ruining our lives, so that her life will suck a little bit less. Right? That's the
Yeah.
entire thing, and that means like, but as you watch the movie up to that point, you think you're watching like a found footage movie. Like when you watch a found footage movie, you are conditioned to kind of just accept that you are seeing something real, right? In the sense of something that's happening within the logic of the movie. But the entire thing is staged because Ronan put together this video in order to get us to care about her story, so that we keep watching until the point where it's too late. So everything she shows us is on purpose. There are seemingly filler scenes where people ask her, "Why are you filming this?" And she says, "Oh, it's for my mentor," but really it's material for her trap, and the trap, and we are the target of the trap, right? And so when I watched it for the first time, I kept thinking, well, I mean, I'm enjoying this, but why is this a found footage movie? This makes no sense. Why is she constantly filming? And like that question exists with every found footage movie, but with this one, it's kind of especially big. Like your child is in mortal danger and is crying and is sick and is dying. Why are you still filming? Like this, why are you still filming question is at the heart of every found footage movie, right? And the answer here is because it's propaganda or it's a trap. Like it's like maybe more marketing than propaganda. But the point is, it's material for a particular purpose. And the only kind of hole I see in that is how did this video get out of the cave? Because Ronan is recording it in the cave when she reveals the face of Mother Buddha, and then dies because she's overwhelmed by the curse, even though she took all of these precautions. So the question is, how did the video get out? And why didn't anybody who retrieved the camera also die? unless she was live streaming. But if she was live streaming like in the mountains of Taiwan, that's a pretty cool feat. Like that's the one thing that I'm not entirely clear of. Maybe if I watch it another 2 times, I'd figure it out. But it's like this whole, like, there's this meta level. And normally I don't like meta commentary or meta levels, like breaking the fourth wall and involving the audience and audience participation. I almost always roll my eyes at this, but here it works. Here I'm okay with it, because the entire thing is like it's woven into the entire point of the story. And I think that's cool.
Because while you're saying, I was trying to figure out, so which scene was like the scene that was current in time, but then it was the scene where she's telling us what we need to do, and obviously her pretty much her goal, her reasoning for why she why she's showing, why she's doing what she's doing. So that makes sense, and that becomes more. I see the film now more like in a better light now. I didn't know that. Like I said, I thought it was like a journey, but in reality, the journey was already filmed. The cover time was what she said. What she says, so yeah, okay, that's better.
It is not quite as straightforward as you might think, right? It's not simply about a person who gets cursed and then has to survive, right? It's this whole idea of spreading the curse, right? Which is, I don't know if you've seen the Japanese version of The Ring.
I think I have, yes.
There's a similar idea there, right? That anybody who watches the tape gets cursed, and you can pass the curse on by making somebody else watch the tape. So this is a pretty similar idea, and I would be surprised if that's not where that came from, right? If the filmmaker who made Incantation kind of was inspired by The Ring. I don't know if that's the case, but like it's a very similar idea, but taken in a completely different direction. But I think that makes it probably unique. Like if there's another movie out there like this, I'd like to know, because it's a pretty cool idea, and it's also not contrived and it's not hacky. Like normally these kinds of devices don't really improve a movie, at least for me. And here for some reason they did.
But did she have to sacrifice her does? Well, I'm trying to think, like, because if she was passing it along to everyone, I know there has to be a human to be fair, there does have to be a human sacrifice.
So I don't think there needs to be a sacrifice to make the curse work. It's more that she takes precautions because she writes those runes on her body, and she also, in an earlier scene, tries to ward Dodo as well, right? Because she, like, when Dodo kind of breaks out from the hospital and there's this news report, it is said that there were these Buddhist runes all over her body, and that's because Ronan was trying to shield Dodo and it wasn't working. Similarly, Ronan, when she goes into the cave, into the tunnel, she writes these runes all over her body, and she also blindfolds herself, and it's still not enough. It's not so much that she has to sacrifice herself, it's that the curse is so overwhelming and the presence of the goddess is so overwhelming that she still dies, and she cannot take it. It still takes her over.
The village were about to sacrifice the little girl, and then obviously when they stopped that from happening, that's when pretty much them trying to sacrifice the little girl, them stopping that, doesn't that show that, okay, there needs to be some sort of sacrifice to the actual...
Mother Buddha is essentially trapped in this tunnel, right? And she needs to be appeased. So a lot of what's in a lot of these folk religions is that you make these offerings not because you want something, but to appease the deity, right? And so sacrificing a child every 10 years is basically just enough to satisfy the goddess. Any less than that, and there's probably bad consequences. So the cult essentially is like you think they're like evil cultists, right? They do sinister stuff, creepy stuff, and then it turns out that no, actually they are containing it for our benefit, right? They've taken this curse upon themselves because they were born into that position, and they're doing it to basically manage this danger. And everything they do is basically just to keep things from escalating. And then these idiots from the big city show up and start trampling over everything. And that's where things get out of hand. And that is why, in the end, all the villagers die, because now all these containment measures were breached, and now things are out of control. And that's basically when the plot of the movie starts. That's one of those things when we would not maybe immediately get what's going on, but like there are these good luck charms all over the town, right? And as they approach the Forbidden Tunnel, they keep mentioning about how this thing is covered in charms. And that is to kind of keep the goddess in, or mitigate the curse, right? Or the influence of the goddess. And also, when they go into the tunnel, it's full of mirrors, right? And in East Asian folklore, mirrors are used to deflect bad energy. So in this belief system, the world is full of good energy and bad energy, and you want to attract good energy and you want to keep away bad energy. Like anything, like pretty much any tradition, superstition, folk belief you find in that region has something to do with attracting the good energy and deflecting the bad energy. And it's the same thing with this hand sign, which I can't do, but basically all the villagers make this hand sign. It goes something like this, right? And it's basically designed to, like, if you know Buddhism, which I personally don't very much, but I think it's explained in the movie that if you know Buddhism, you are supposed to assume that this is like a general welcoming positive energies, welcoming blessings kind of gesture, but it's actually kind of a mirror image of that. And so it's about not inviting good energy, it's about spreading out bad energy, and that's the curse. So the entire thing is about getting the bad energy out there.
But didn't they introduce the bad energy though with that god that they're worshiping? Because that's I was thinking to myself. Okay, so I was thinking either it's a thing where what like the deity that they're praying to, it's obviously just to keep them alive. What I'm trying to build up to was because they didn't say the reason for what they're worshiping this god for, like as in like because usually whenever people introduce demons and stuff, it's for a reason, it's for a price.
Mhm.
But the price in this wasn't really said. It was just like that their god was really just there. So I said when I thought to myself, okay, maybe that god is just incorporated in their life. It's just a way of living, and like you said, it's for the good and the bad energy. Cool. If not, then did I miss a reason why?
So that's basically it. So the god exists or the goddess exists no matter what, and you kind of have to deal with it. It's a fact of life. It's a force that's in your life. You basically have to accommodate that, right? There's no ignoring it. Like they didn't summon this god for some to make some bargain or something, the way you might summon a demon or something like that. The idea is that this god exists and it's in their life. Like everything they do is related to kind of appeasing that god, essentially. So they have no choice. They just have to deal with it. And that is also why you cannot get rid of it, right? That is why you can only lock it up in a vault. And that's what one of the things I was getting at as well with the symbolism. As you go into the tunnel, it's full of mirrors, right? And that is there to deflect the bad energy, right? That's this whole thing about attracting good energy, repelling bad energy. And by littering this place with the mirrors, you are basically repelling the influence of the goddess. And first thing, like the Ghostbusters do, is they smash a bunch of mirrors and they cut open these charms that are blocking the entrance and stuff like that. And that is basically what lets the evil spirit out, essentially. And then when Ronan returns to the tunnel at the very end, she just has a sledgehammer and just smashes all of them, making making it as easy as possible for the goddess to do her work. So another thing I found really cool, like we can go into a whole bunch of different stuff and you can really go down a rabbit hole, right? Just as one example, in the Chinese language, the word for the number 4 sounds like the word for death. And guess how many times Ronan bashes her head against the floor when she dies? It's 4 times. Right? So it's stuff like this, right? Like you really have to be steeped in kind of that symbolism and in those traditions to really notice stuff like this, right? But once you see it, it's everywhere. Like this whole thing about, like one scene that's really creepy is when she seeks out the priest, right? Who might be able to exorcise Dodo. There's a bunch of Buddha statues in the room, right? And at one point, you hear this like stone grinding noise. And when the camera looks up again, all the Buddha statues have turned their heads away from Ronan, indicating that they have turned their backs to her and she's on her own because she's invited these evil powers. There's all sorts of cool stuff, right? Like you can really go into it, and we're not the right people to do that because I can just report what I've read about this, right? But if you are steeped in this tradition, this is like blasphemy 101, right? This is don't do any of the things the people in this movie do. And I can kind of appreciate it kind of from a visitor's standpoint because I've been to various countries in Asia. I've been to Buddhist temples, like witnessing like people's rituals and stuff like that. Like nothing super private or anything, but like just stuff that goes on like in temples, right? And you have no idea what's going on. You don't know what any of it means. You're kind of afraid of doing the wrong thing, or of coughing at the wrong time. You don't know what will upset people. You don't know what is meaningful and what isn't. And imagine now being in a situation where all of this stuff is real in the sense of like a life or death curse situation. That's not the story of this movie, right? Because Ronan does not have that much distance, right? Like to her, all of this is fiction and tradition, and things her grandparents did, but she's still familiar with it, right? But I can appreciate the events in this movie just from the point of view of somebody who's just stuck in this situation and is experiencing this and not knowing what's going on and not being able to kind of anticipate what's going to happen next. So it's, for me at least, it's cool on that front. One other thing I really wanted to get into is with this is that despite all of the things we've talked about, right, like the language, the religious aspect, the cultural aspect, all the customs and traditions that we don't really know, it's still pretty accessible, I thought, because I wanted to kind of get your perspective on this as someone who's just getting it completely fresh. But I think the basic story of it is pretty straightforward, where the basic events of it and the logic of it is pretty clear, and is the movie outright tells you what's going on, right? Ronan showed up in this ritual. She got cursed. She didn't take any of the precautions. She ignored all the warning signs. The curse is now with her, and it has spread to her daughter, and it spreads to anybody who sees the video. But that spreads out the curse over more people, and that is ultimately the only way out for Ronan, right? Like that's ultimately the basic plot of it, and that part is pretty straightforward. I think you can pick that up on your first viewing, and then every time you see it, you see more hints, I think.
Well, what do you mean by hints? Hints for what?
Like more details, more wrinkles to the story, that sort of thing.
I see.
So every time I've seen it, I've picked up on more details and understood more, and there's less where I'm confused what's going on. Because the first time there was a bunch of stuff where I did not know the significance of it, right? So, for example, like in the very beginning, when the police officers shoot themselves, right? That's a little bit confusing. It's a little bit random, but no, it's Ronan like trusting in the police, much like in The Exorcist, right? Trusting in the institutions that are supposed to help you, saying, "Look at this thing." She probably said something like, "I don't even believe it's real, but look what's been happening," and then, an hour later they're dead. And that makes sense once you've seen the rest of the movie, but the first time you're seeing it seems a little bit random. And this is basically the case with every aspect of this movie, where anything that at first seemed a bit random, maybe, you realize where that piece goes in the puzzle. I kept thinking about Nosferatu as I was watching this, because Robert Eggers makes movies where you have to have seen and read the same influences that he has. And when you do, it's like his movies are genius. But if you haven't, you have no chance. Because the movie simply doesn't tell you what's going on, right? It doesn't tell you the rules. It doesn't tell you what the imagery means. It doesn't tell you what the references are. And as a result, you either get it or you don't. And here there's like a staircase where you can take as many or as few steps as you want. But the basic plot of it is outright explained to you. And I kind of appreciate that when a movie does that, where you're not completely lost. Like, nobody is completely lost, but everybody can take as many or as few steps as they're comfortable with. I actually kind of think that's a really smart way of doing it, because nobody's going to get all the references and going to get all the pieces. But if you get 20% of the pieces, that's something. If you get 40%, if you get 70%, like, everybody can kind of settle on where they're comfortable. And every time I watch it, I take one more step upwards, because now I see a reference, or now I get the background to what this imagery means or whatever. And I think that's cool, and I think more movies should do that.
No. Like, would you have still understood 70% because you've got background knowledge of obviously Taiwan and obviously their practices and their taboos and what you should and shouldn't do, etc. Like, if you didn't know all of that, how much would you say you would, like, percentage wise, estimate of course, would you say that you would still understand of, like, what's going on? Is that 50%, 40%?
Maybe something like 40. So there's lots of little details where I just wouldn't know, right? Because although I've spent some time in that part of the world, it's not like I studied Buddhism or anything like that, right?
Kind of knowing, would you still have a satisfactory experience? Like, would you?
Yeah, I think so. And the reason for it is that there's no minimum hurdle, right? Like, the movie basically takes the first step for you, and then it encourages you to take more. And basically, a lot of my appreciation for this movie came from reading the accounts of people who were raised in that part of the world with, like, a Buddhist background. And they just explained to me, like, why this is so freaky, and, like, the experience of watching it with their very traditional grandparents, for example. Like, that's not something I can replicate, right? But a lot of it comes on that level. But there's other stuff there too. Like, I've traveled in, like, rural China and kind of been in a village, and people are just a little bit weird. And part of that's because it might be the first time seeing a foreigner, but you kind of get this weird vibe from this town. And that is something that's replicated when the Ghostbusters show up in the small village, right? Where, and that kind of, that's already one step. And then from that point on, see like their weird customs and their strange food and the part of town you're not supposed to go to. Like there are a whole bunch of quite familiar pieces, but they then kind of add up to there's a death curse emanating from this cave, and for the last 500 years, these townspeople have been containing it for the benefit of the world, right? Like that's at that point you're like 10 steps in, but I think most people would be able to take a couple of those steps, and then maybe you read some background and you take two more, and then you watch it again and you pick up another piece. So I think it's really smart in how it's calculated, and none of the pieces are really essential. Like for instance, the thing about when Ronan bashes her head against the floor 4 times, that is really significant if you know like Chinese folk practices. Like if you go to to a city in China, it will not have a fourth floor, right? So in the same way that buildings around in this part of the world don't have a 13th floor in many cases, in China they don't have a fourth floor because four is an unlucky number, for example. And that is something you pick up very quickly because all you have to do is go into one hotel and realize that there's no fourth floor. And then you ask why, and then people tell you. Or like the thing about deflecting good and bad energies. There's a Bank of China building in Hong Kong. That's you might have seen it like in movies or something. It's this narrow, tall building with like essentially like these triangles. I put up a picture of it, and they got sued because they have a slanted roof, and their neighbor was suing them because they're deflecting bad energy onto them. And so they had to do something about that. I don't remember how that turned out. But then it's the kind of thing that happens, right, in that culture. And it's serious business. Because that it is believed that might cause your business to fail, for example, right? So when they explain this thing about like this gesture is actually a perversion of a blessing, and how and Ronan just outright explains to you in the beginning that a blessing and a curse are kind of the same thing depending on your point of view. And so her cursing you is a blessing on her. And also the more people you curse, the more blessed you are, because the curse gets lighter, right? So like the important stuff gets explained very obviously in the sense that the movie just tells you. So to basically understand the basic story of it, I think it's pretty hard to not get the basic story because the important parts they outright tell you, and then they put in layers and layers of more stuff. And it's up to you how deep into the onion you want to go. And I think that's really cool because I've bounced off some really great movies because I simply did not read the same books as the director. Mythological allusions, historical allusions, philosophical ideas, right? If you don't know that stuff, then good luck, right? The movie outright makes no sense. And here the movie makes sense, and it's richer the more you bring to it. This is not the only movie that's done this, but this is like the most extreme and the purest form of that concept, I thought, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. Because it makes enjoying the movie so much easier, but also engaging with the movie so much more rewarding. Like, I've had more fun reading about this movie than I have about just about any other movie, because every time I learn something, and it's something interesting, and then I watch the movie again, and I say, oh, now I see why that's important. But the basic story of it is accessible to just about anybody.
It made it universal, and now I see why. I didn't see everything that you said now.
But the basic plot of it, you got, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. I just meant like I got like I'd say 50% of it, but I just didn't understand that there were layers to what I got. So like for example, to see why I said, oh, like she was talking to us at the end, which is true, but in reality, that was her whole plan along. You know what I'm saying? Which I didn't know. So I was like, okay. And even with the police officer, see when that scene first happened, I didn't necessarily know what was going on. But obviously, after watching when the guy said he's not going to show her the video when she was watching the video footage. She said she's not going to show her the video because obviously, and then you saw what happened to him. Okay, so there's a lot of things that you kind of have to like rewind, you have to go back to understand what's happening in the present times, which is good. I think that is definitely, it's good that they made it universal because if it was a thing where you only understand if you have background knowledge, then that would have been a fun experience.
A lot of movies would be more fun if the movie took the first step for you, and then there's more if you want it. I think Dune did this pretty well as well, where like just basic concepts were explained fairly well, and a lot of people still didn't get it because it's so out there. So it's not like Incantation is the only movie that's done this, but it's the one that's done it the most, I think, that I'm aware of. All right, any other impressions, questions, thoughts on Incantation?
I'm gonna watch it again.
I guarantee that just about anything that seemed kind of generic will seem much more deliberate the second time you see it. Like there's this scene where the social worker, I don't remember if it was like school children or whether it was the orphanage, but they were watching like a glass blower, getting a demonstration of the glass blower in his work. And then one of the social workers just walks over to, takes this rod of glowing glass and just
Yeah.
puts it in her mouth, just killing her instantly. And she was the one who was trying to get like a good luck charm to protect Dodo earlier. And so the curse got to her to punish her. So in hindsight, like on the next viewing, that'll make more sense. We see, oh, it's not a random person in the background; it's actually that person. So and pretty much everything in this movie is like this, where a whole bunch of stuff happens that seems random, or cliche, or we're doing this again. But then on the next viewing, you see, oh, those two scenes, like 20 minutes apart, connect in some way. So that's also cool, I thought. And on top of that, it's also really creepy. Like, okay, so like one last question before we go. What was your experience when the face cloth is removed and we see Mother Buddha's face?
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of build up, right? We talked about how it drives you insane, about how it's just evil and it's wrong, and then there's a whole bunch of build up where Ronan explains what she's doing, and she blindfolds herself, and then she very slowly removes the face covering, and then we see into this abyss. Like, what was your experience watching it for the first time, not knowing what was coming?
I'll be honest with you. I think that part was anticlimactic for
It
me.
was didn't creep you out.
No, no, it didn't. Because I think two. Okay, so two things. The first thing is it didn't creep me out because it's not that I was okay. So it's not okay. So at first I was thinking to myself, okay, is that's it. But then at the same time, I was like, what else can you expect? Because I like even it's fitting for the scene because all you see is just like a dark hole. And you know what I'm saying? I don't think there's much more you can expect from that. But at the same time, I don't think for me that was the main importance of where the fear factor was coming from. It's mainly everything that happened before that was like, even though it was a build up to that in a way, it wasn't really a build up to that because the journey was before that. That at the end was just it was fitting if that makes sense because just looking into the abyss, looking into a dark hole, just like I understand why. But it just
It's
didn't
also
make any sense.
impossible, right? It just goes on forever. Like
Yeah.
this should like the physically it's not possible, right? Because the statue is only so big. And
Mm,
then the camera just lingers on it and you just look into this void.
mm.
And you've been primed for 2 hours how powerful this being is. And you're looking past the material world. So for me at least, it absolutely worked.
But yeah, for me, it wasn't that. It was like I said, it was anticlimactic, but it wasn't something which ruined my experience because I said, okay, what more could they have done? You know what I'm saying? Because it's like I don't think there would have been much that would have kind of like scared me. So when I saw, it, I was like, okay, that's fair because I don't think there would have been anything that they could have produced or designed that would have been like, oh my god, that build up was worth it. And I was like, okay, no, that's worth it because she's looking into nothing. And technically speaking, we haven't even really seen. We've only seen like bits of what this their god looks like from the hands, the darkness signs, etc., etc. So that for me it was fitting. I just think everything before that was the importance of the film. I don't think that scene necessarily was the importance, but it was definitely a good finishing touch. Just for me, it was a bit anticlimactic. I was like, oh, okay, is that it? But then I said, okay, no, that's cool. That's I'm fine with that.
Mhm. Okay. Any other last words?
Nah, I think I had a good experience. I'm definitely gonna check it out again. I just want to see, yeah, just kind of like see what I went missing.
Mhm. And I think that's high praise, right? Like I don't like you don't often rewatch movies, right?
Yeah, nah. Actually, I'd probably say as soon as I started, like before, so when we started this podcast, I didn't like watching movies. Again, like that's the first time I watched a movie. Actually, that's a lie. So the movies I'd watch again are Hunger Games and Jason Bourne. Those were generally just the two movies I'd watch again. And maybe should like traditional movies on a Christmas day, etc. But like generally just I just don't watch movies. You know, like for the second time after watching it. But after starting this podcast, I've started to do it with the movies which like that had layers on it, like layers the way you would have to understand. So yes, I've started doing it recently. So with this one, I'm definitely gonna do it.
Okay, that's high praise.
All
All
right,
right, shall we wrap it up?
yeah. All right, guys. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please like, share, and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts of what you thought about Incantation if you watched it.
If you like this video, tell a friend. If you hated this video, tell an enemy.
Alright, guys, we'll catch you next week. Au revoir.
Bye bye.